This week marks the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. Celebrations to mark the anniversary are happening all over the country.
And here in our own backyard, the Brooklyn Art Museum is celebrating the event with a film series called A Time for Burning, Cinema of the Civil Rights Movement. Here to tell us all about it is movie critic Mike Sargent. Mike, thanks for being here.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we have to talk about this film that's getting a lot of buzz lately, and it's at the event. It's called King of Film Record, Montgomery to Memphis. Tell us about this. It seems very powerful.
It is very powerful, but I have to say off the top that whenever you hear Martin Luther King speak, you're always taken by what a powerful orator he was.
Brilliant.
And how articulate he was. And I think it says something about how having someone who's so articulate was able to change and help instrument change for a persecuted people, and I think that's significant. So that being said, one of the great things about film, and film has been likened to like conscious dreaming. It's a shared experience. So I think it's important not just to see these films, but to go with an audience, to go with loved ones, to see these films and have that experience.
Why?
Why? Because I think one of the most powerful things about a film is that it can transport you. Literally, the information and what you find out in a film, whether it's narrative or documentary, can change your life. And I think it's really important for people, you know, especially us in our generation and generations beneath and above, to see this is our ancestors. These are the ancestors of the people in this country who did what they did for us to have the freedom we have to sit here, be on TV, to get paid, to do all kinds of things. And the documentaries that they have, especially this one that you just mentioned, this was a documentary that was actually made in 1970 and was collected all kinds of footage, and it was a one-night event. It only showed once. And it was so good, and it was actually deemed culturally significant by the Library of Congress, and it was nominated for an Academy Award. So this is the first time you're getting to see this. This is the first time it's actually been restored, it's been shown again. So this is more than just an opportunity to see a documentary. This is a piece of history. And documentaries do just what Martin Luther King did. They articulate something important.
And this is no ordinary documentary. It includes narration from luminaries like Harry Belafonte, Ruby Dee, Charlton Heston, James Earl Jones, Burt Lancaster, Paul Newman, and Anthony Quinn. Come on.
Well, you know what's interesting, and I'll mention Charlton Heston, is because Charlton Heston, I once read a biography on him and read about all the stuff he was doing. He was a huge civil rights activist. So were a lot of people like Burt Lancaster, Marlon Brando, but they didn't do it like they would today, like a Sean Penn may fly out to Haiti to get a photo op. They did it because they believed in it. They were artists.
But you don't think Charlton Heston and think civil rights movement.
No.
You think guns.
Well, you know why? Because after in the post-'80s, and he became, you know, a Republican, and he was all about gun rights. So people paint him as this racist Republican, you know, statue, and that's not who he was at all. He was someone who was about making change and wanting change and civil rights. And that suggests, to me, that says a lot about the heart of the artist. Because artists have the ability to see beyond whatever it is and hopefully do something more.
So how did they all become part of the project then?
Well, they were all part of they were there. They were there.
Right.
They marched. They were there at the events. They walked. If you look at certain footage, you'll see people like Marlon Brando, Charlton Heston walking with Martin Luther King, which is something, again, you don't hear about. It wasn't done for the same reasons.
Exactly.
You know?
No one was trying to get publicity.
No, it was not a photo op.
It wasn't a photo op.
It was, things were changing. And the other part of seeing this documentary that's so powerful is, you know, you look at it and you realize yes, we have a long way to go with what's happening, but it must have seemed almost impossible to change things at that time. And to see what it took, and these people go from their homes. There's some other films there. There's one by Haskell Wexler.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the other documentaries that are featured.
Well, he did a documentary called The Bus.
Okay.
And
what is that about?
The Bus is literally this. Now, Haskell Wexler is a filmmaker. He's a director of photography. He's done all kinds of things, but he went to the march with a delegate from California and just filmed the whole thing. Them picking up people, going on this bus, just traveling there. So it's like this intimate little portrait of people who did it. And these are not famous people. These are just people who cared about what was going on. So it's pretty powerful.
Wow. What about the march?
Well, the march was something that was commissioned to be done, and it actually took place that day. They shot that day. It is the quintessential record. And that, if anything you wanted to see about the march, not so much Martin Luther King, that's the film to see. It's a half hour, it's black and white, but it's pretty powerful. because it shows, and it's in 3 parts. It shows, preparation, going, getting there. It shows being there, all the people, the crowds and everything, and then it ends with the speech.
Really?
And it's pretty amazing.
So let's talk about Madeline Anderson. Why don't we know more about this huge cultural, historical figure?
Well, that's it.
And who is she?
Okay, first of all, that's a damn good question.
Okay.
And what's
well, that's
interesting,
why I asked it, Mike Sargent. Thank you very much.
Madeline Anderson was the first Black female director to make a half-hour documentary.
Really?
She was one of the first Black women to be brought into the Film Editors Union. Okay, and she did the film that they have a couple of her films there, but she did a film called Still a Brother. No, actually, I'm sorry, not Still a Brother, but she did a film. I'm losing my.
It's a tribute to Malcolm X.
A
Right?
tribute to Malcolm X. That was one of the films she did. She did that in 1960.
Okay.
But then she did a film called I Am Somebody, which chronicles the Hospital Workers Union. It was commissioned by the Hospital Workers Union.
Wow.
And at that time, it was 400 women, mostly women of color. Only 12 were men, were non-women. And it was about their struggles to be brought into the union and to affect change. And at the time, it was one of these things where a lot of criticism of it said it's not really a feminist film, even though it's about women. And Madeline herself has said that she didn't care whether it was seen as what classification it was. It was a film by a Black woman about Black women for Black women.
Wow.
And it was very powerful. And it, again, in itself is something to see. Seeing these documents of what people did and how powerful that, whether it was protest or whether it was a sit-in or a march, seeing these films just really reminds you of what we take for granted today.
It'll be a good opportunity to take the younger generation to go see these movies and see what
1,000%.
really went on.
Much more so than a lot of films that are out now.
Well, To Kill a Mockingbird is also being screened.
Yes, it is. Well, you see, here's the thing.
Powerful book, won the Pulitzer.
Powerful
won Gregory
book.
Peck,
Gregory
his
Peck,
Oscar.
His Oscar, probably, arguably his greatest role.
Greatest work.
And the
Atticus
thing is,
yeah, absolutely.
That film, and there's another film in there, actually, believe it or not, with William Shatner as a racist, called The Intruder. Yes, and it's
Star
by
Trek sort of?
William Shatner. He plays a racist who goes into a small southern town to stir up trouble because of an integration of a school. This is by Roger Corman, the king of the B movies. It's pretty powerful.
Okay.
But what was happening at that time, this is all in the early 60s, is Hollywood was reflecting what was happening. And I think one of the greatest things about art and film is it always reflects the culture it sprang from.
Yep.
So in the 60s, this was a time where things were beginning to change. Jim Crow laws were just being let go of. And, segregation was like a new thing. It was not met with, let's just say, open arms by most of the country.
You mean integration?
I'm sorry.
Yes, integration. Segregation
Integration.
was really
Segregation.
old.
I'm sorry. Integration.
Yeah, integration is a new thing. Yeah.
Desegregation.
Desegregation, exactly.
Was happening, and this movie and Kill a Mockingbird are Hollywood films that were reflecting what was going on. And again, the power of a movie like Killing Mockingbird, imagine what that was like to see in the early 60s. And if you really, for many people, even today, most people if you live in a community where you don't really deal with Black people, your only view of them is the news or what you see on TV or movies, so you have no idea. So seeing a movie like this really, because you care, and again, that's the power of movies, you care about these characters and it's such a powerful story, you feel for this man. And by the time in the end and what happens in that movie, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
You cannot not be moved.
It's true.
You can't be, and I have
They
to
say it was as important to that era as Uncle Tom's Cabin was to.
Wow.
Definitely, definitely. And I have to say, I'll liken it even to Fruitvale Station.
Okay.
Because,
What
again,
are the parallels?
well, for me, the parallels was I cannot forget seeing Fruitvale Station, where I saw it in an audience of 90% white people, maybe 75, 80% men. And by the time that movie was over, they would, you hear
Really?
it, and again,
There was an emotional response.
an emotional
a palpable
response,
emotional
a
response.
palpable emotional response, and it made for people who may have no connection with a young Black man to see really what it's like, and to realize they're human. What would I do? And that's the best thing about a movie. What would I do? What would I do if I were there? How would I feel when
Now,
these things happen?
do you think that Gordon Parks' The Learning Tree will have some of the same impact because it's about a young man going through racist times? So tell us
Definitely.
about that one.
Well, you see, Gordon Parks, now, first of all, that's another milestone, okay? It took till 69 for Hollywood to actually let a Black person direct a film.
Wow.
1969?
1969. That's the
kidding?
first time. Now, I'm not taking away from.
You're talking about Oscar Micheaux and all
I'm
of that.
not talking about Oscar
This
Micheaux.
is for Hollywood
I'm talking about Hollywood Studios.
Studio.
Paid
Okay.
a black man to do, and that was Gordon Parks, who
Wow.
was a renowned photographer at the time, and had won a Pulitzer
He
and
shot
whatnot.
for Life magazine.
Yes,
Yes,
he did.
Amazing work.
And so, yeah, The Learning Tree is a very powerful film because it takes place in the past, takes place in the 20s. And this film was made in the 60s, and it was important because it was showing what it was like then, 40 years earlier, and now, here it's 40, 50 years later, to see that film will have even more resonance because now it's almost 100 years later, and it's still the history of our country. So it's a milestone in terms of filmmaking, it's a milestone in just in terms of having all these films in one place.
And I think it's also interesting how some of these movies are still so relevant in the issues we're facing today.
Completely relevant.
So this
It's
is important for us to
completely
go see these things. And when and where and how can we go see?
Well, they're all at BAM, okay?
Okay.
And the festival runs till the 28th. Now, some of these films...
BAM, Brooklyn Academy of
Brooklyn
Music.
Academy of Music, right.
Okay.
Now, some of these...
In downtown Brooklyn.
In downtown Brooklyn.
Near the Barclays Center.
Near the Barclays Center, okay.
And tickets are how much?
I don't know how much tickets are,
Okay.
but if you go to the
Good
website,
website.
you go to the
Yeah, check
website.
it
But
out.
I'll say this, even if you don't go, some of these films are available on DVD, you know, especially the new one, the filmed record, Montgomery to Memphis. They're just coming out for the first time. And these are films you should watch with family, with people who you care about, with younger people and older people, because I think it's important. And especially if you've got friends of different races, nationalities, it's that kind of experience, I think.
And it's a
You
good
need-
opportunity to bring them over and watch
it
them
is.
with you.
It is.
Yeah,
That's my
educate
point.
people.
And I think you shouldn't ignore the significance of celebrating a day like the March, because it is significant. It's something that we don't want to forget because we still have a lot more to go.
It's true. It's not just Black history. It's America's
It's
history.
America's history.
Okay. Well, Mike Sargent, thank you so much. You're
Oh,
always
you're
so
welcome.
good.
Well, thank you.
All right. You
Appreciate
come
it.
back again soon?
I hope so.
All right.
You're watching Arise Entertainment 360.